I was able to release my fear of getting into the woo and teach the spiritual side of EFT and quantum EFT, where we are really looking at what's happening at a soul level, what are our soul recurring patterns, and what is it that karmically we came here
Have
to.
you ever asked yourself the question, why am I here and what is my sole purpose? My guest today, Jenny Johnston, has some of the answers, which may amaze and inspire you. The founder of Quantum EFT for the Soul, Jenny is one of the featured voices in the new global co-authored book, Tap Into Your Best Life, EFT Tapping Stories of Real Life Transformation and Healing. She features alongside 30 powerful practitioners from around the world sharing tapping breakthroughs. The book is aligned with Global Tapping Stories Day, April 17th, a worldwide movement celebrating practitioners and ordinary people who share their stories of hope, healing, and transformation thanks to EFT tapping. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi, Carol. It's really great to be here. I'm over in Australia and you're on the other side of the world, and it's always great to connect across the world.
Yes, Jenny, I live between South Africa and England. And what's wonderful is that so many of us from all over the world have come together in Tap Into Your Best Life. So, Jenny, your chapter in the book introduces us to real-life examples of powerful transformation in clients who shifted in quantum EFT past life sessions. How long have you been doing this method of tapping? And what are some recurring themes that come up over and over, perhaps stopping us being more visible or speaking up about our gifts?
That's a really great question. Quantum EFT came into being properly in 2013 when I began running the workshops. However, it was being created long before that. Quantum EFT is based on the teachings of Kryon. So it's combining tapping with my experience as a clinical hypnotherapist and trained past life regression hypnotherapist with soul contracts and agreements, higher learning and lesson, those sorts of things. When we're doing a quantum EFT session, we're not only going back in time and looking at where does this originate from, whether it be in childhood, in the womb, ancestrally, or in another lifetime, but when we're there and present with it in the now, we can change it. We can tap away and release the trauma. We can bring in the higher learning and lesson of life between lives. We can go back to the soul planning session. We can get an understanding once the healing's been done of what's going on at a soul level.
Yes, I think that can make a big difference when some of us hit a roadblock or end up on a sandbar on our ship of life. And where does this come from? Or we repeat certain patterns.
Exactly.
And this
Yes.
can get to the root of that. So that's very interesting. And I see the Egyptian theme behind you. Could you tell us about perhaps one of the recurring themes in your life that you cleared by going back to what seemed to be an Egyptian lifetime?
Yes, I had an Egyptian lifetime where I was priest or priestess, but it was where I had the teachings and the knowledge that was spiritual, but I was being told what I could say and what I couldn't say by a higher government. And I had a small group of people that I taught the truth to. But if I got found out, it could be my death and their deaths. And so I had to teach in secret. And I had another lifetime where I was also teaching in secret when I was in the US, and I was a white person and I was teaching the Negroes how to read when they weren't allowed to. So I had to do that in secret. And my father was a governor, so it was like if I got found out, it would be not good. And so what I learned with this recurring pattern was that it's okay now for me to not have to teach in secret. And even in the EFT world, there was always a little bit of let's keep it clinical EFT, let's keep it available for the psychology and American Psychological Association, let's not get into the woo. I was able to release my fear of getting into the woo and teach the spiritual side of EFT and Quantum EFT, where we are really looking at what's happening at a soul level. What are our soul recurring patterns? And what is it that karmically we came here to experience again that we hadn't solved yet? I was able to release my fear of getting into the woo and teach the spiritual side of EFT and Quantum EFT, where we are really looking at what's happening at a soul level. What are our soul recurring patterns? And what is it that karmically we came here to experience again that we hadn't solved yet, so that we
Yes.
can heal and solve karmic patterns that we came here to do using Quantum EFT.
Yes, I like that. I like that. It sounds like in doing these past life sessions, you stepped into your truth and what your life purpose. And so, how many people's lives have you touched? Estimating with this soul directed way of doing EFT.
It's hard to know, because even another one of the co-authors, Rosemary, who's part of the book, she trained with me. And so I've trained trainers, I've trained people who have gone on to touch thousands. So it's hard to estimate how much my bringing out Quantum EFT and being a trainer with the EFT universe, how many lives that has touched, because it goes down through a whole lot of other people.
True. And also, you have some best selling books. Tell us the names of those, which people might read and adapt with their own tapping or other work. What are the names of your books that you've written about this?
So my best-selling book is Tapping into Past Lives, and that one tells of my story in more detail and how Quantum EFT was born. And it tells lots of different stories of people going back to their origins of where their issues began, sometimes spontaneously in a clinical EFT workshop. We'd go back in time. And so it was about then allowing people who were studying clinical EFT to know what to do if somebody went to a past life, to an origin. And then there was many stories that were written by people who had experienced great transformations.
One of those stories is the second chapter after yours in the soul section of Tap Into Your Best Life. Because again, we were dealing with spiritual past life episodes. I'd like to hear your seed story, but let's just tell the story of this mother and daughter session you had, which is in the book. Could you share that story in brief? I think that it was 9 years ago and the repercussions have been amazing. Go ahead.
And that was a mother and daughter that attended a Quantum EFT workshop. The mother, Kelly, she had her session first. It was only about 17 minutes. And it went back to a lifetime where she was a healer and the mother died in childbirth that she was trying to help. And she blamed herself, for the community blamed her. And she had this fear of stepping out into her true abilities. And so she kept herself hidden in this lifetime as a writer. And then when it was time for her daughter in that workshop to have a session with me, she said, I was that mother who died in childbirth in that past life. And she'd been struggling with Lyme disease for over 5 years. It was crippling. She'd had to drop out of college. And what we found as the higher learning and lesson in that at a soul level was that she was afraid of being taken away from family again, like she did in that lifetime, because she left little ones behind when she died in childbirth. So she had this great fear of leaving family behind at a soul level. And so once we cleared that and we thanked her body for holding on to Lyme disease to keep her safe and at home with family, but it was no longer required, and we released it from her current DNA, then it was basically gone. She went out canoeing with her brother afterwards. And how that then set up the rest of their lives is that now Callie is an amazing author of books that she's getting out there a lot now. And Shannon, the daughter, is now an amazing healer, and she works on soul level things as well now. So she was able to get on with life and go to university. And that's just one story where we find that we often have a struggle or a problem in this life, and it might be with one particular person. And when we follow it back, we find that there's many lifetimes of similar scenarios that have set up that same pattern at a soul level in this lifetime.
Yes. That brings me to your seed story, Jenny. Tell us how you came to be doing this work.
So I had a dark night of the soul when my mother died very suddenly, and then straight after that, my husband took off, and I was left with 3 little kids, 3, 6, and 9. And then I also had a back injury at work, and so I had to have spinal surgery. And it was when all of those 3 things had come and hit me, as the universe likes to present you with issues that make you look at what your life's all about. That's when I started stepping out of occupational therapy and stepping into clinical hypnotherapy and past life regression hypnotherapy, and combined that with the Kryon teachings. And I'd done many travelings with Kryon around the world, or Lee Carroll, who channels Kryon. And it was then that I got his endorsement to go ahead with creating the Quantum EFT workshops that began in 2013.
Okay. And I think I just would like you, without going into too much detail about Kryon, which we do explain in the chapter, what does he mean by we connecting with the innate? Just tell us the crux of that.
So innate is our body consciousness. And a lot of people might know about our body consciousness through kinesiology, when you ask a question of the body and then muscle test and the body answers. And so our body has a consciousness that is innately wise and has an innate wisdom. And so when we're working with Quantum EFT, we're addressing that innate wisdom, as well as inviting our guides and higher self and our multidimensional or quantum DNA, which scientists used to call 97% of our DNA junk DNA. So we are addressing our multidimensional or quantum DNA, as well as our current DNA, as well as our body consciousness, as well as our subconsciousness. And we are asking, where does this issue and this thing that I'm feeling in this life, in my body now, come from originally? And often people will get a flash of a scene that is a past life. And that's where we go. And from there, we work to release any physical, emotional trauma and belief that has been installed, or even a promise. I found in my story in the first book that there was a soul promise that had occurred in another lifetime. And so sometimes we might release a soul promise. If you were a nun in another lifetime and you had a vow of suffering and poverty, then of course we need to release that and say that was appropriate for that lifetime. It's no longer appropriate now, and I give permission to release it. So we claim our power as beings of light to
Beautiful.
give permission to release soul contracts that no longer apply.
And an interesting one that I've heard you talk about is your own, and it relates to many people who say, I want to meet my soulmate, or is this person my soulmate? Tell us about that encounter you had with a past life partner that shifted things for you about, I don't know if it was about abandonment, or you tell us.
It was right after my husband left, and I'd been with him since I was 15, so he was part of my identity. And it was 2 months later that I met somebody when I was out at a pub, and we just instantly knew each other. And so although we were only together for 3 months, we actually did past life regressions together. He was my husband in a past life. He went away to fight in the American Civil War, and he promised that he would be back, and I was pregnant at the time in that lifetime. And he, of course, died and didn't come back. And so in this lifetime, one of the first things he had said to me is, don't get attached, I'm not here for long. Because he was only here in visiting the Naval Training Centre, and he wasn't here for long. But we had this huge connection. And so it was then that I realised that he was here because of that soul promise that he'd made, that he would return. And he did return, but he said, I'm not here for long. And it's like we're not meant to be together in this lifetime. But it was that soul promise and that extreme soul connection that I felt, that I realised that there was a lot to these soul contracts, soul promises and vows.
Yes, because I think You also mentioned this between lifetimes.
Mhm.
Things can be happening with certain people today, and there can be a soul contract to have played that
Yeah.
role. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so sometimes we go above the trauma into the light, into life between life, and we ask the master beings of light to give us the higher learning and lesson and why we agreed to play that role and why we agreed to have other people play that role in other lifetimes and in this lifetime. And so it's a really deeper state of trance or hypnosis when we're in those states, and we get amazing lessons and higher learning that obviously come from a place higher than ourselves and our consciousness. And sometimes we also go to a planning meeting. So a life between life before this lifetime or before the lifetime that we're visiting. And we get to see at a soul level why we asked our friend, a soul, to play that role of our nemesis or to play a different role. And so we get a soul understanding. It's only after we release trauma that we can get these soul understandings. And it's like when we get a cognitive shift in clinical EFT, it's like we get an understanding at a soul level. And then we apply that soul understanding or higher learning and lesson back into our DNA and into our future in this lifetime. And so it imprints that higher learning and knowledge, and it creates a new way of being and a new understanding at a soul level and a human level.
Yes, I've been working on that in my own consciousness, thinking about the state of the world today. And some of the things that are coming out into the open without going into politics or anything like that. Why does this work matter today for everyone?
Because when we raise our own consciousness, we're raising the consciousness of humanity. And so the more that we're working with ourselves, we are not only just affecting us, but we're affecting the people in our lives, the people in our past lives, the people in our future lives, the people in our ancestry. And so when we're raising our own vibration by having a soul understanding and a soul learning and more compassion for ourselves at a soul level, we're also understanding that other people have their own soul contracts and agreements. And as much as at a human level, we're going to feel sadness, feel anger, feel all of the emotions of might be going
Outrage,
on.
even,
Outrage, helplessness,
outrage,
all of
powerlessness, yeah. These can
Yeah.
come up as we look at the world, and yet as
Exactly.
we clear our own issues and look at it, are you saying from a higher perspective,
Yeah.
at least it brings us peace within. Tell me more.
To also know that each person out there has their own soul contract and agreement, and to honor that this is the role that they have chosen for their own higher learning and lesson and for the higher learning and lesson of humanity. And it's also about the understanding that there's always been darkness and dark energy in the world. But now that our vibrations are raising more, we're shining the light on these. And when we're shining the light on it, all of a sudden it can be overwhelming, like the Epstein situation. But now people are being held accountable. So with that accountability, new ways of being in the light where the darkness isn't going to be tolerated.
Probably round about our age. We've been saying since the 70s and 80s, I've been hearing the new world is coming, the new world is coming. And as the darkness is exploding in front of us, perhaps this really is the times we've chosen to come in to be part of that new world. That's how I'm beginning to see it. So we know why this matters. And I think one of the reasons I've facilitated Tap Into Your Best Life is to give people who've never written a book, I know you have, or who've never told their story, a voice, and to show that in many of the stories in the book, they overcame abusive situations to step into their power and become healers or to change their lives. And I think when people read this book, they will perhaps get a glimpse of how clearing our own issues can open up a new way for us to live in power and in our truth. But that's what I feel was my mission with this book and with carrying on with a movement of Global Tapping Stories Day. Every April the 17th, we will build up to other people around the world telling their tapping stories. And I think this could be amazing for the world.
I agree.
Jenny, in your own case, let's end with where can people find you? And I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, quantumeft.com.au. I also have hundreds of free videos from sessions in my books as well on EFT Australia on YouTube. So that's one word. And yeah, there's also on my quantumeft.com.au, you can get a free copy of my Tapping into Past Lives book.
That's great.
Yeah. There's free gifts in Tap Into Your Best Life. People can also get a free copy of my second book.
Okay, so really out there spreading the good word for Quantum EFT and helping us in the world. So thank you, Jenny, and see you in the book. See you and Tap Into Your Best Life.
And thank you, Carol, for allowing all of us to get together to be able to do this.
If something in this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, because transformation begins when we stop being silent. Until next time, keep tapping, keep growing, and stepping into your best life.